Liberal, or former Liberal MP Ramesh Sangha has committed the gravest sin in Canadian politics, talking about political extremism inside the Liberal Party, or now even the Conservative Party, any political party. We're not allowed to talk about any type of extremism unless it's white supremacy. That's the only one we're allowed to talk about. And what did Ramesh do? Well, Ramesh Sangha has been pretty consistent on sort of trying to expose the Khalistani extremism that he claims is all the way up inside the Liberal cabinet. This is why he was kicked out. He was kicked out for, spreading conspiracy theories that would be harmful against people inside cabinet. And most recently, he had had done an interview with Indian TV where they talked about the resignation of Navdeep, an obvious Khalistanis, Bains, and he brought up the accusations that, again, Navdeep Bains was tied to Khalistani extremism. Now, Navdeep Bains, if you remember, Indian media was reporting on him being involved in corruption, immigration fraud, his dealings with Raj Gurwal, and Senator Linda Frum retweeted this. Then she was forced to apologize to Navdeep Bains, which was strange. And I'm just going to outline, the biggest question actually here is, that's most important for Canada, who called Linda Frum and forced her to apologize to Navdeep Bains? That's a very fascinating question, and it probably will lead back to the heart of corruption within Canadian politics. But to explain the extent of the Khalistani extremism in Canada, so the Khalistani movement is pretty much created by the Pakistani ISI in the 1980s. You have the Operation Blue Star in India, but in Canada, there's a Khalistani faction that tries to take revenge on India for the Sikh stuff there, and they blow up the Air India flight. The worst terrorist attack in Canadian history was Khalistani extremists blowing up the Air India flight, which Jagmeet Singh for the longest time couldn't condemn because Jagmeet Singh is also an alleged Khalistani who has been seen speaking. He's actually advocated for Khalistan. He's also been seen with extremists who have advocated violence for Khalistan. So somehow this movement is alive in Canada, and that's really a symptom of just how politically correct we are, that we can't actually deal with these issues. But to go back to the Raj Gurwal thing, Raj Gurwal is the Liberal MP who lost his seat because of the scandal. Now, Raj Gurwal, it turned out he was $6 million in debt in gambling, right? That's a bit of a compromise for an MP having $6 million in debt. However, within a week of the story kind of went away for it because he paid off the debt. He was no longer in debt. How did he get $6 million? The thing was, the community just was so strong and they supported him, right? Obviously, this was money coming in probably from the Pakistani ISI to clear up his debt so he can continue to serve them in Canadian Parliament. Now, the scandal was too much for him to weather. The media tried to ignore it its best, but they had to get rid of Raj Gurwal, who is Navdeep Bains' good friend. Now, the reason why Sangha was kicked out is because he talked about Navdeep Bains, who I have always said was the ringleader of all the Khalistani nonsense, and he was Science and Innovation Minister at the time. Now, he was kicked out for conspiracies, but we have to then evaluate how conspiratorial was Ramesh Sangha. So Jagmeet Singh, he's NDP, but he's been openly advocating for the Khalistan. So you have sort of a data point there that Canadians are so blind to this issue that someone can lead a federal party, even though, he's openly Khalistani. Now, do you remember the trip to India when Jasper Atwal, the convicted terrorist, showed up in Trudeau's retainee? That probably has something to do with it. So there's also a story that, of course, not reported in Canadian media, but it's happened in India, where a high-ranking military Air Force colonel, who is Sikh, by the way. Remember, Khalistanis are claimed to be Sikh separatists who want a separate Sikh homeland. Now, the majority of Sikhs actually don't back them because they live much better lives in India than they do in Pakistan. It's Pakistan where they might actually need a sovereign nation, not India, right? So a lot of Sikhs are very civically involved and really, really hate the Khalistani movement because Sikhs have risen to the highest point in Indian society. They see this as illegitimate. So we have an Indian Army colonel, high-ranking Indian Army official, who won't meet with Canadian cabinet ministers, Harjit Sajjan, Amarjit Sochi, Navdeep Bains, because he considers them terrorists or terrorist supporters. So if you're saying Ramesh Sangha is pushing conspiracy theories, you then have to look at the data point that what he said of, Khalistani ideology being prominent in cabinet is actually backed up by the Indian military. The Indian military also believes Ramesh Sangha's appointment. Now, here's some behind-the-scenes things I know. I have heard for years, because I've talked about Ramesh Sangha when he originally wrote the article in the National Post or came up to them, that Ramesh Sangha couldn't walk into a Tim Hortons in Brampton without having someone scout the location first, because that's how under threat his life is from extremists. He's been talking about this for years, and the Khalistanis have been trying to kill him. 2, on the Navdeep Bains issue. So I had a friend who's putting on a very fancy event. I have fancy friends. I mean, I have a moderately successful Canadian internet television show. Of course, I have a fancy friend. But he was putting on a big event. A fancy place. It had Canada, India, and other countries, and it was, dealing with more, we'll say, dharmic issues. Not very political, but, a spectacle event. And the Indian Consular General was attending, and all these people, and sent out invitations to the MPs. However, when Navdeep Bains, a cabinet minister at the time, said he'd show up, right, this created problems. Because if he invited Navdeep Bains and allowed Navdeep Bains to come, right, then all the Indian government officials were going to back out, because they would not be in the same building with Navdeep Bains. So he ended up not inviting Navdeep Bains, or disinviting, or saying it was full, and then Navdeep didn't show up, and the Indian Consul General and other Indian politicians showed up. But this is why I say, like, Navdeep Bains being a Khalistani is pretty much an open secret. It is not something that people, oh, really? No. It's, like, talk to anyone in the Indian government who understands Canadian politics, the first person they will start screaming about is Navdeep Bains. They do not like him. So bring it all back this is now the pattern in Canadian politics. Someone tries to do the right thing, expose corruption, and they're kicked out. Right? And this is sort of this is what I've been raising. This is how Aaron O'Toole and Justin Trudeau are working hand in hand to undermine, you could say conservatism, Canadian values. I think undermining Canadian values is a better thing, because he just kicked Derek Sloan out for a fake white nationalist thing, right? Which he set up himself. Well, at the same time, Aaron O'Toole is actually, meeting with Muslim Brotherhood front groups. At the same time, Derek Sloan is saying, no, we shouldn't be meeting with extremists. Derek Sloan's the only one who will go after every type of extremism, right? But the only type of extremism you're allowed to talk about now in Canadian politics is white supremacy, which is evil. We all know that. But there are other types of extremism that work in concert with white supremacy. Far left and far right feed off each other. We've known this forever. All right, so now you have a system where Ramesh Sangha has been kicked out because he raised the issue of political extremism, and Derek Sloan has been kicked out because he's also raised the issue of political extremism. And we have, two parties, or three, all embedded with political extremism, talking about how we need to fight political extremism, but only white supremacy. Which, yeah, let's fight white supremacy. Let's fight all extremists. If we can count the Muslim Brotherhood the same as the white ethno-nationalists, I'm happy. We'll be on there. But right now in Canadian politics, you cannot go after corruption if it is Muslim Brotherhood, Khalistani, or far left, and that's a big, big problem, because this is the type, it's reciprocal extremism. You want to fight white supremacy, you have to do something about the other types of extremism, because they will fan the flames of far-right extremism if you do nothing about far left and Muslim Brotherhood and ethno-nationalist nonsense. You can't have any of it. That's the point. But the Canadian political parties seem to want all of it but one.